Welcome to the first episode of Marketing Talks. Marketing Talks is a concept where I interview a variety of business owners and marketing professionals to discover their story and their insights. My name is Beazley, and along with having been in the marketing industry for over 10 years, I have a passion for helping businesses grow by engaging audiences and conquering online marketing. Today's guest is Adrian J. Stewart from TCM to help us explore the secrets to crafting engaging copy that drives sales. Adrian is a B2B Messaging Specialist, brand strategist, copywriter, educator, and rapper with more than a decade of experience. It is my pleasure to welcome Adrian, so without further ado, let's jump straight in.
Thank you, Greg. A hell of an introduction.
So I hope you like my fancy background here. Somewhere in the world.
It's beautiful.
So you have a pretty interesting skill set, and I suspect no one was really expecting to learn that you were a rapper as well. Maybe you can walk me through what your story is and how you ended up becoming a B2B messaging specialist.
Yeah, sure. Well, the rap thing is, I don't really consider myself a rapper as much anymore. Let's just start with that. I feel like I'm doing music more now, and I'm producing more. I'm doing vocals and kind of going more on the production side. But yes, you're 100% right. I was a rapper, had several albums as a rapper, but that's neither here nor there. We're talking about messaging. So yeah, how did I get where I am today? I suppose I've always been interested in writing. Even when I was a kid, I always used to write. That's probably one of the reasons I ended up doing rap as well, because it was sort of lyrics and writing. But professionally speaking, I started in sales. I started cold slanging American Express credit cards in shopping center. And over time, just sort of, I went from sales to sales and training to more account management and strategy, and then gradually moving into basically closer to where decisions are made. And then in 2015, I moved to Berlin on chasing a girl, let's be honest. And I decided that I was going to freelance. I'd never freelanced before. I just kind of said I'm going to do it. And ended up going there and sort of fell into writing articles and copy. And then from there, I just sort of continued down that path and was doing a whole bunch of different kinds of writing, but strategy was always like my interest as well. And then over the years, and working with the agency when I came back to Australia as a strategist, I just started, I suppose, getting clearer down that niche of strategic writing, copy and comms. And that's sort of where I'm at now, running my own business.
That's super impressive. I guess, was it pretty daunting when you started the freelance part of it? Like, were you just like, what am I doing? How do I do it?
Yeah, pretty much. I'd actually remember I bought a course by a guy called Ramit Sethi. I don't know if you ever heard of him. He did this book, I Will Teach You How to Be Rich. And the course was called Earn 1K. And it was basically like how to earn your first 1K from freelancing. And so I went there and I was trying to do email marketing, actually. I was like cold emailing people, trying to like do marketing or do strategy. And the question was daunting. Yes, at first, because after a few months, there was still nothing to really come through. And then things start falling into place. You get one little thing here, another thing there. And, fortunately, Berlin's pretty cheap to live. So it was a good place to figure things out. And I'm really happy I did it. I didn't have any other option so it was like I had to find ways to make money writing.
Yeah, and without going off too much off the course here, but what was it like being I suppose an English freelancer in Berlin? Is there a lot of work in that space, or was it very German focused?
So I know you're in Cologne, and Berlin is a very international city. And if I'm honest, I didn't really work for German companies. Like, I think I had one client in Germany, one or two, and then I had clients in one I still work with today, actually, one guy who I started working with then in Denmark, and some back in Australia and UK. So that's one of the benefits I like of writing, is it's so you can be anywhere. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
So no, it wasn't an issue in terms of that. Although I did still learn German because that was one of the reasons that I wanted to go as well.
Yep. Yeah, that's good. That's awesome. What a story. I suppose let's go to the heart of the topic here. So I guess one of the first questions I had was, what is the difference between copywriting and messaging?
Yeah, it's a good question. If you ask me, there might be a different answer, obviously, than other people will give. But the way I see it is messaging is like the broader framework in which copywriting sits. So messaging it's like what you say to who, where, and how. Whereas copywriting is just the specific writing that brings that messaging to life. So a big challenge is actually figuring out what to say and how to say it in the first place. And I like to split those two things apart because people talk about good copy and, what makes good copy, and they focus on the words. But the way I see it is the words are like the last part. It's actually about the message, because you can have the best words and the wrong message, and it doesn't matter. It's going to be ineffective. So messaging is all about a strategic approach to understanding what we need to say, where we need to say it, and how to get the intended results.
Right. Yeah. I guess there's a lot of, I suppose, like customer insight or consumer insight that goes into the thinking behind the messaging, the right messaging. And then I suppose the copywriting comes after that in a way.
Correct.
Should become easier.
It should be that way. And the projects that I've done, because I like doing the messaging, I like the strategic side first, because I find it much easier to do when we've gone, all right, let's stop for a second. Let's have a look at, the market, the company, the audience, especially. Let's understand all that. Let's get a real clear understanding of what we need to say first to get the result, like what's actually the strategic communication objective here. And then once that's figured out, and that takes a fair bit of work, that's probably the majority of the work. Once you're clear about what the message is, then writing the copy flows more naturally. As an analogy, it's the same as, say, if you were to, writing a book or something, you're going to structure it. You want to work out more or less what you're trying to communicate. Obviously, a book is different because it's going to evolve with the narrative as well. But, you don't jump straight into the execution. The kind of analogy I like to use as well, I use a lot of analogies, is like a sculpture. I'm not a sculptor, but I assume if you're going to sculpt like a figure, say, a human body, you're going to start with like an outline of the shape, right? You're going to get a pretty rough outline of that overall shape and direction to ensure that your proportions are right. It's giving the right feeling. And then gradually you will like chip away at it and get each part more and more detailed and polished and refined. But you're not going to spend all the time getting the head perfectly polished and right while you haven't even done the structure of the body. So it might sound like a random comparison, but the point there for me is to go, it's much easier when you're clear about the overall message to then go and do the copy.
I think that makes sense. It's a good analogy. I've been working on developing ebooks recently, and I think one of my learnings out of that, even though it might be quite straightforward for one of the lessons you learn through school and university, but it's actually just structuring what are your key headlines of the whole ebook. So coming up with what are the engaging points that the reader needs to know through every piece of this ebook, and then once you have your titles, just go ahead and start researching the contents of those titles. I can definitely see the relationship with the analogy.
100%, man. And I think often we don't do that because it's difficult to get that right. Like the work that goes into getting, say, the messaging or the overall comms part, it's actually challenging. That's especially to understand, like, what it actually is that we should be saying. So it's essentially like, what are the truths that we want to communicate, but then how are they framed in a way that appeals to our audience and motivates them to take action? And a lot of it takes research, and it takes a process. And usually you start with like because I'm trying to work through this. I do it a lot, and I'm trying to build a model that makes sense just for me, and then hopefully can share it. But it's like you start with a whole bunch of messages. You might have like 100 different things that you can say, and it's about trying to find out like what actually should we say, and in what order to get that outcome. And a lot of the challenge is actually going, okay, that's not relevant. That's not relevant. That is, but okay, then what order do we put it in? And what's the best flow of information? How do we move from point A to point B to point C? And it's that like building the architecture and the blueprint is the main part, right?
That's really interesting. Can you hear the weird noise in the background?
Again, I was like, what's going on? Someone's drilling, like.
Yeah, there's someone's drilling here. So, God, it's a great morning for doing this.
This has been, for the listeners out there, it's been one moment, one win after the other so far.
Oh my God, is it really distracting?
I've had more distracting things in my life. We can power through it. Okay. It could actually be like one of these. What do they call them? Binaural beats tones, one of these earth resonant tones. Maybe we could do like
Yeah.
Elevate the brain waves of the listeners.
All right, that's good. So my next question is, so what are some of the challenges that you've noticed businesses often face when it comes to messaging?
There's a few. Being consistent is a key challenge, I think. So especially the more companies I've worked with, it's one thing to say, I do a lot of brand strategy messaging. So, figuring out the core value proposition and rolling that out to the fundamental reasons why people should buy from this company, and then that's great. But then it's like often businesses work with multiple writers. It's like very rare that they just have one person that does all comms. And even then, if they have more than 1, 2, 3, 4, especially if they work with agencies, keeping consistency in that messaging, not just in the words, but in the tone, that's a big challenge. And as a company I'm working with at the moment on an ongoing basis, and I'm seeing that myself because I've done a lot of the messaging from the ground up. And now, obviously I'm not going to do every piece. So we've got other people coming in, and it's now going, okay, well, because what they're writing is it's not really resonant, it's kind of getting there, but it's not capturing that same essence. So it's like, how do I create guidelines or something to help them nail the messaging? So yeah, being consistent is a big challenge. Being clear, I would say, it's hard to be clear. So that's why people aren't a lot of the time, because being vague and using bloated words and unless you put the effort into communications and developing and refining it, and you just accept the first thing that comes out, the first thing that comes out is going to suck. Like, it still sucks when I do it, and I've been in this profession for a long time. I've spent a lot of time. So if it's not the main profession and you just accept the first thing, it's going to suck. So I think people were saying things like real business outcomes or, meaningful results or proactive solutions. Yeah. These are all, it's like empty words. And the problem is that they kind of sound good on the surface. They feel like we are achieving real business outcomes. It's like, I suppose, like, as opposed to a fake business outcome, but it's not specific. So the problem when you're vague is that by communicating something vague, it's like, we can catch all, it could be for everything, but it's much better to say something like, double your ROI in 2 months, because that might be very clear. It's like, okay, well, that's a real business outcome. Or it might be, increase, like, generate 3 times more leads, or, whatever it is. Just being more specific rather than using these vague words is going to be more effective. So I think that's another challenge, is being clear, because it's often difficult to be specific. What else? Being unique is one. People often follow the crowd in a very same, and just end up not wanting to, I work a lot in B2B. So a bit more conservative typically, not wanting to rock the boat, wanting to kind of do the same as everyone else. So that's another one, being unique. And then lastly, I think the main challenge is just that not everyone understands the importance of it. And obviously I'm going to say it's important because what I do, but messaging flows through everything that you do in a business. So from your sales conversations to your emails, to your ads, to your website, no matter what marketing you do, there has to be a message in it. You have to say something, and you have to say it in a particular way. So if you don't have a clear messaging strategy, or you're not clear about what you need to communicate to whom, why, and how, then you're going to have little bits here and there, and no matter how much you spend on these things, the results are going to be isolated. So I think that's a big challenge that brings it all together. It is important. I think it's important to invest the time.
Yeah. I think myself being in the industry, I've seen that it's often really challenging to get that that top line understanding of messaging in a business. So I feel like if you don't have dedicated copywriters or like a brand strategist or something like that that's overseeing all of this activity, quite often you get different ways of communicating, different tones, different ideas that get funneled into the customer spotlight, and it becomes very disjointed, very you don't actually know, the customer perhaps doesn't actually know who they're talking to in the end, or like, what does this mean versus that, and the copy in the email doesn't match what's on the website and in the sales script and things like that. And it's a very common problem that I've seen, and one that's very difficult to master and overcome if you don't have the special expertise that are sort of managing that as well. I think.
No, it's so true. And because, it falls, like messaging just falls under, it's almost like I don't know how you call it, the bastard child of marketing, that it's like, it's not a clear discipline. It's not like, okay, comms, I suppose, but comms includes, a whole bunch of things. Then you've got a lot of marketing disciplines, but it's very rare for smaller companies, especially, to have, even bigger companies, to have like a person dedicated to marketing, to messaging, and being clear about the consistency. And it does exist. I'm not saying it doesn't, especially in corporates, you got head of comms and everything, but it's a challenge. It's a real challenge, and I'm not sure the best way to solve it as well, because obviously I can work on a project basis with clients and help, say, develop a structure or whatever, but it has to be iterative as well. And that's what I'm finding, even with this company that I'm partnering with. Like I said, I've been developed the messaging from the ground up as well. So I've been there from very much the genesis of it, and trying to create the guidelines. I'm doing my best to write it, but then I even look back at things I've written and I'm like, oh, maybe I wouldn't say that like that again. So it's like, because it's a startup as well, so it's evolving.
Yeah.
It's like, I think it's just important to have, like I say, for companies, just have an awareness of the importance of the messaging, because like that's what you're putting out there to your audience, and what you're putting out there is going to influence what they do, whether they buy or they buy from you. So you need to be cognizant of whether that message is consistent, and how can you do it? I suppose having some document to start with, but I would say it needs to be iterative, and just checking the emails and stuff. If you're outsourcing things, like you need someone who gets it and can go, no, that's not right. Like, we don't say best regards. We're more casual. We say cheers, for instance. We're not very passive in our language, or more active, or very formal, or et cetera, et cetera.
And I myself, I work for a German company, but it's across Europe, so we're dealing with very different languages, obviously. Have you noticed that can often be like a challenge as well, to sort of define what the messaging should be in each culture, for example? Like, does that change, or like, what have you noticed in your experience?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I would assume it would. That's a tricky challenge, because if there's cultural sensitivities and cultural awareness, then maybe there needs to be the same way that you would create personas and segments to communicate to discreetly. Like, if you've got, just say, the middle-aged woman persona versus a young man persona, you're going to communicate to them in slightly different ways. In the same, not completely different, because it still has to be unified as a brand, but there might be different messages. So I assume the same process would apply cross-cultural. I do some ghostwriting work for some fairly large, like global businesses, which are in a similar thing. So they work across different regions, and ghostwriting for some key people in the organizations. And I'm not at that level. There's not much consideration from what would it matter by cultures, because it's more, here's the overall global message. But I think, to answer the question, it's definitely a consideration that should be based on the objective of the communication. It's just part of the context.
Yeah, I think I wasn't expecting a 100% accurate answer to that, because I think no one's really sort of solved it in a perfect way. So I think it's a common challenge there. But I guess along with the challenges, do you have any good examples that has stood out for you that you can go, it's not just about the copywriting and the words, it's the messaging here is actually what's very evident.
One thing that always comes to mind for me is Canadian Club. They did this campaign years ago, and the line in the ads was just over beer. And so, for those who don't know, Canadian Club is whiskey, and it's a whiskey, and they were advertising with like CC and dry, with dry ginger ale.
Yeah,
that was the reason I just found that so good, is because it just taps into such a core consumer insight that there is a point in the night where you've been drinking beers, and then you're like, I don't really feel like another beer. Where there's like the next drink, or maybe it's like, I don't really feel like beer today, but I want something. I don't want wine. What's the alternative? And they've that campaign, I think, really nailed that insight. And just the line is just so simple of just over beer. I think it's so effective because it's effective not because it's clever copy, but because it hits here or here, it's that like core insight. And that for me is a definition of good copy.
Yeah, it says a lot with 2 words.
So much. And I think that, so for me, like if we're to say, apart from just examples, like great copy communicates more with less. It's easy. That's why I fucking hate per word pricing. I wrote actually something on my LinkedIn why I think per word pricing is bullshit, because it's just the most ridiculous thing ever. It's like, I'll try and avoid going on the full rant, but great writing says more with less, right? So that's to be profound. Some of the most profound statements are dense with meaning. They say 3 words, and those 3 words say so much. And that's per word pricing views words like they're commodities. Like, if you want, per word pricing, buy a dictionary, like there you go. That's $20 and you can have all the words in there. Some assembly required, but there's your words. So that was just a little aside rant, but good copy. So again, in that article, actually, there was another ad which I put there just to illustrate that point. It was a MacBook Air ad, and it just said light years ahead. So it had light, full stop, years ahead. And obviously the whole premise of the MacBook Air is that it's super light. And that I found was just really powerful and elegant way of getting across two key meanings. So it's got across the fact that it's light, and it's got across the fact that it's very advanced and great technology in 3 words. That's powerful. So I think if you look for a metric of great copy, one metric. Obviously, there's plenty, but not even just copy, just great writing. It's saying more with less.
Yeah.
And anytime
Apple is definitely the pros in that arena, I think. And another one, an age-old one that springs to mind is obviously "Got Milk." The old campaign, says a lot. Really drives home that consumer insight. So yeah, that's really interesting.
That's literally probably where they got over beer from.
Yeah, you're probably right.
It's the same premise, and so great marketing just steals from everyone else. Like there's no original ideas; they're all just iterative. But just to continue on that point, there is so Gary Halbert, who's like considered one of the best direct response copywriters. In his book, The Boron Letters, which is basically letters that he sent to his son while he was in prison for fraud. I think that's another story. But it's a very good book because it's just, you get great copywriters writing letters about life, copy, marketing, etc. And in that book, he talks about, just very briefly, that great copy, and I'm paraphrasing here, but great copy shouldn't draw attention to itself. It should guide you where you need to go. And that to me is really powerful, because it's not about going, like, if your customers are going, "Ooh, those words are really good," like then the copy's made itself present. They shouldn't be commenting on the words at all. They should be like going, "Damn, I want this. I want to buy this. How do I get it?" Or feel something. It's the words are always a vehicle for emotion or for something. They're just a symbol. It's the meaning. Words carry meaning, and the meaning is more important than the words. So if you're this is why I also hate this agency shit of people like doing stuff for awards, and it's like the only award should be based on sales, right? Like,
that's true. Yeah.
They're paying you in order to, or brand awareness, depending on what the client objective is. But if you're, if you're like going into advertising or these sorts of field in copy in order to fulfill your creativity, you're in the wrong industry. Like, this is like, you can be creative for sure, but your creativity is a tool to achieve an objective. And I feel like a lot of time, some of people forget that. And like, if I'm a client, I don't give a shit if your thing won an award unless it actually helps. Okay, maybe because you won an award, it got more awareness and everyone loves it, so it just got more reach, and therefore our brand equity went up because of it. Great. Yeah. So I know it's not as cut and dry as just sales all the time, but it's not about applause for your own writing. You learn that pretty quickly. There's not a huge amount of glory. At least in my
that's interesting too. So I guess I know you've kind of touched on some of these things before, but what are some of the mistakes that you that people often make when it comes to copywriting?
Jumping into writing without thinking about what you need to say is probably a key one. I think when people think about copy, it's natural to want to know how to write better copy, and how to improve your writing. And that's good. You should do that too. There is tactics and techniques and, things like using contractions and use active voice and looking at sentence structures and understanding rhythm of sentences and assonance, alliteration, all that sort of stuff. That's going to help. But that's like, it's the difference between, I know you play music as well, so you get this. It's the difference between having a great session player, so someone who is technically awesome at guitar or drums, but can't write a song for shit, and then having someone who can write a great song, and they might be able to play it pretty well, but not as well. So they will get the person who can play it to really polish and bring it to life. But it's the songwriter who makes the money, so to speak. It's the songwriter who actually is writing these things that stand the test of time because they've composed something that has meaning. And it's the same in copy as far as I see it, that it's about the meaning, because the meaning affects change, like an emotional change or someone to buy. So this is like a concept that I've been refining. It's that all these things are just about meaning. It's like message delivers meaning, and meaning affects change, or whether that's a change in your emotional state or your perception. And then copy, music, art, whatever these different things are just tools to convey meaning. And got a little bit esoteric there, but I think the point is important. But yeah, like in terms of other challenges, mistakes, I think that's probably the main one. From a top line perspective, as I mentioned before, there's just being vague, accepting the first draft. So you've got to be brutal with your own writing. Writing is like, I love it, and I also fucking hate it at the same time, if you know what I mean. It's like the amount of time that I'm just so frustrated by doing it. But then at the end, when I read back, I'm like, actually, that's really good. And I think that frustration, if you don't care about it and you're not putting the effort in to make it as good as you can, you don't feel that frustration as much, I don't think, because you're like,
Do you find sometimes that you might be looking at it too much and you have to take a step back or have a break or maybe show someone else, get some feedback or things like that, just to sort of get a different perspective perhaps?
Absolutely. Yeah. Like you work out your own creative flow, I think. And it doesn't happen in one sitting. Like you got to just chip away at it. Like I've got a process that I go through more or less. It's not fixed. It's not fixed, but typically it starts broad and free flowing. So it's like, make sure I've done the research, get the information, and then just kind of capture rough draft thoughts as they come with no structure, just free flowing, blah, 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 getting everything down. And then like second pass through is trying to assemble some of those pieces into a place that's like, all right, so here's kind of the core themes. This seems to be the key message. That's important, and then gradually start like going, okay, this is pretty much the flow. And then it might be like, all right, let me have a punch out a draft and just try and write without really thinking too much. Okay. And then, you gradually go, okay, now you got like the rough draft, and it's like, oh, that doesn't work. Move this around, move this. And like I said, with the sculpture, it's the same thing. You start broad, and then you just come in, and then the end. One little hack, I suppose, that I do at the end is because I'm writing usually in like Google Docs, when I think I'm done, like I'm pretty sure it's done, I will change the font and the color and the size, and then take a break, and then come back and then reread it. So it's like I'm seeing it with fresh eyes in a way.
Okay. So just seeing the copy in a different size or font, it makes you see in a different way. I've never heard. That's a really interesting technique.
Yeah, it tends to I tend to pick up little typos or things I might have missed.
Okay. Yeah.
But it's the break as well. Like you need to step away from it. Give yourself like a reset, and then come back. You could print it out as well, I suppose. But I think by changing the font size, so the font size and the color, it just triggers something in our mind where the brain's like, oh, that's new. It's almost rather than being like in the engine room.
Yeah, I see. Okay, that's so I guess for the listeners here, so so for a business who might have limited knowledge on how to produce effective copywriting, what would you suggest are the top things they could should consider or could implement today?
Hi, me. No, I'm just kidding. No, get clear about the message. So ensure that you know what your core value proposition is. Like, why should people buy from you and not anyone else? How does that value proposition play out to different segments if you have them? Understand your different audiences if you have them. Make sure you get their key needs. Once you've got that, then ensure that your message is actually aligned to that. I think that's important first. So if you haven't done that at all, I would definitely recommend it because it just helps bring it all together. So you're like, okay, this is what we're about. This is what we sell. This is how we communicate it. This is why it's great. These are the people that should buy it. These are the needs, etc. That to me would be the easiest, well, not the easiest, but the most important thing to implement.
Is that almost like writing a brief for yourself in a way?
Yeah, I suppose it's like it depends how you look at it. Like it's important when I was trying to do it for my own business, which is, it's always easier to tell other people what to do than to do it for yourself. It's hard to go, I had to do that to go, all right, I need to split from copywriter to say manager or strategist in my own business. So it's like I create a brief for it so I can write. Other things that they could do, just basic tips that will just like level up the writing quickly, kill the jargon, read through your copy and then look for jargon and get rid of it.
So jargon would be like any fluffy words that don't really have a lot of meaning to it. Is that kind of what you're referring to there?
Well, ask yourself, is this clear to the audience?
Yeah.
Like, as in who we're talking to here, can they read this and get this straight away? Or are they going to go, what does that mean? Or will they look at you and go, imagine that we're talking and you say this thing to me. I'm like, and you're like, do you understand? You're like, no. It's like, will they politely nod when you say these words? Because they don't want to seem dumb for.
I always like it when I see businesses say improving business efficiency or something like that. It's so vague. It's so okay. Everyone's trying to do that. Everyone's trying to really achieve that for every business. But what does that really mean? And I've been to a lot of websites like that where I've just gone, I still don't know what this company does. Like it's really, I have to deep dive into what their product is, or maybe look at reviews online, like actually go somewhere else to actually figure out what they actually do, which is, I guess it's one of the signs that their messaging needs a bit more work.
Yeah. I mean, when they're unlocking the next level of efficient outcomes for meaningful business results, I can't believe that you don't get what they're talking about. Exactly. But no, you're 100% right. And funnily enough, what you did there, go check your reviews. That's a good copywriting tip as well. Read reviews of, like, if whatever your product is, read how customers are talking about it. Read your competitors' reviews. And then two things you can do is look for common themes. So there might be, say if you're doing, I don't know, like a nail salon or something, and everyone is talking about it was clean, or that, good service, or I could book in, or whatever these themes are that all the positive reviews talk about all the time. And then whatever the ones that the negative reviews talk about, you can go, okay, well, we can assume these are important because these are the things statistically that are appearing more often in reviews. So that's the first thing you can do to help validate any customer assumptions or get cues for customer insights.
Yeah.
The second is to actually just lift copy from the reviews, because it's all about writing in a way that is how your customers think.
Yeah.
The reason this jargon shit doesn't work is because real people don't think like that. They're not. Maybe in the fluffy, there could be in the B2B world. I'm open to that argument if someone wants to make it. But people aren't sitting there going, God, I really wish I could improve my efficiency. Maybe to a degree, right? But it's like, it's not improved efficiency. Like, I wish I could get some proactive outcomes. They want to solve a problem. They want something. They want a particular result. And the reason people don't write those results, or they're not clear about them, is because it's hard to get down to that point and get really clear about it. A good way to do it, or especially for B2C, it's harder in B2B, but is go through reviews. And sometimes you can just steal outright, like, well, that's really cool the way they said that, and you can just take that and then put it in a headline. So what else are we taking? What other tips? Other quick copy tips?
Yeah. Any other tips?
Quick copy tips. Oh, yeah, plenty of quick copy tips. Make it about the audience. So this is a really quick fix. Call it a drinking game. Go through your company's website, and every time you say we, us, our company name, take a shot, and then see how drunk you are at the end. So what I mean by that is that, yeah, I mean, to go through the corporate world, you're going to be hammered pretty soon. What I mean by that is that as much as possible, you want to use you language. So you want to write to a single person reading it, to the customer and to the prospects. So rather than, and I use the example in some of the presentations I do, but rather than saying something like, we have a 24/7 customer service hotline, you could say, you can call our 24/7 customer service hotline, or you can call our customer service hotline 24/7. Just, it's such a minor thing, but by you saying to me, we have a hotline, you're basically hitting the ball over the net to me to go, oh, that means I can call that, and that's good because of X, Y, Z. But if you say, right, you can call the customer service hotline, you've removed one point of thought for me. You've already clarified it, and it sounds small.
Interesting, yeah.
It sounds small, but all of these little points of friction add up. So the more work, and there's another concept that I have called the weight on the bar. So the more weight you put on, like imagine doing a deadlift, poor copy and poor messaging stacks all the weight on the bar and then throws it over to your customer and expects them to lift it. You're basically going, you do the heavy lifting and you figure out why we're great for you, because we haven't bothered to do it. We've made it complex because either we just don't know how to make it good or we haven't put the time in to make it good. So the heavy lifting is on you. And problem with that is that there's other options, and people, if it's too hard, they're not going to do it. So a simple way around that, again, this is a smaller piece of the bigger picture, is to, as much as possible, use you language rather than we. And then lastly, one tip would just be read it aloud, like read your copy out loud. So that's a really quick way to discover whether you're talking nonsense.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think, when I've written copy, I often feel like I've written it in a silo almost, and I don't actually see how I can improve it until someone else has written it, or until I've really taken that step back and really tried one of the techniques that you're suggesting. So it's there's some really good tips.
I mean, I look back through stuff I've written and just be like, oh my God, what was I thinking? It's I think you have to. Yeah. There was a long time. Like another tip for anyone who wants to write, you have to just get over yourself in a way. It's not about you. It's really not. Okay. Yes, it's you are writing and certain attachment to it, but you should be your own worst critic. And I know that's like a stereotype now. I'm sorry, a cliche now. But I posted something the other day of on LinkedIn saying writing the art of deleting 95% of what you create while keeping self-esteem. And that's it. It's like, I don't think there's anything like it, where I'm not sure if everyone's like that, but from those I've talked to, I think it resonates, where you write, you delete, you write, you rewrite, you write, you rewrite, you write, you read it back and you're like, no, not good enough. No, not quite. It's so, and it should be, you shouldn't be sending shit to a client going I think it's all right. I haven't really, I think for me, by the time I'm sending something to the client, it's the best I can do at that stage, and then sometimes I'll get some good inputs and builds. Like you said, it's good to have another point of view, and it's like, okay, that's cool. But I think it's important to be your own worst critic and keep your standards high. Yeah,
that's good advice. It's good advice. I when I've dealt with copywriting and messaging in the past, I've often heard the phrase of tone of voice, and I'm kind of curious, what how would you define, like, what does it mean by having a tone of voice, and for and like, how would you determine a brand's tone of voice, like when you were working with them?
So we touched on it before a little bit about consistency.
Yeah.
I mean, tone of voice is simple in the way that I have a tone of voice as a person. You have a tone of voice. And fundamentally, and I think we lose touch of this, but brands are like, in a way, we're personifying companies as brands. We create brands as people almost, because we can't form a relationship with a company, but we can form a relationship with a brand. Like, we can connect to a brand because it has, in some ways, human-like qualities. It has a voice, it has beliefs, it has values, it stands for something. So we can connect with the brand based on that. Tone of voice is part of the broader brand's identity. So I suppose to illustrate the importance of tone of voice just in speaking, there was a long time ago now when I was in university, I did an assignment which was about the medium and the message. And it was like to illustrate how the way something's delivered can impact the meaning more than the content itself. So what I did is I got the Martin Luther King "I Have a Dream" speech. Yeah, a very powerful speech. Most of us only know this short part of it, but if you listen to it, he's very hypnotic and very rhythmic in the way that he delivers it, and it goes da 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 da. Like, it's very the tone and cadence and rhythm are very powerful and very hypnotic. So I played this in the class, and then I read the speech myself, completely monotone, and to illustrate that the tone and the delivery has such a huge impact on how that meaning is received.
Wow.
What I'm trying to make with that is that for brands, we don't have necessarily this, brands, they do speak, I suppose, through ads and things like that, but it's what's the tone that we write with, so how does that voice, because every brand has to speak, the copy is its voice. What language does it use? So tone of voice essentially is about the language that a brand uses to communicate its message. So, does it say, is it very direct? Is it funny? Is it authoritative? Is it, very casual? Is it formal? A really good example for me to understand brand tone of voice is MailChimp. So if you've ever used MailChimp, I'm sure you have, it's email marketing. They've got quite a unique tone of voice, and it's a bit more fun and very distinctive. So tone of voice is like essentially how a brand talks. And in markets where things are pretty commoditized, not commoditized, it's the wrong word, where things are pretty same, and there's little differentiation between the product and the offer, having a distinctive tone of voice and a brand identity can be a differentiator. So if every other brand in your industry is kind of generic and corporate sounding, and then you come in as the brand who is a bit more like youthful and casual and personable and human, then that's going to help you stand out, and then people might have more of an affinity to your brand. So
that's cool. One example is a good company that uses tone of voice really well is Cards Against Humanity. And so if anyone that doesn't know, it's a funny card game, typically played at the pub or something like that, where it's just nonsense cards that you throw out, and it pulls together different phrases. But what I find really interesting about them is that through their email communications, they really don't take themselves seriously. That they just say, they even say don't buy this product, and it will just make people want to buy it. And even the littlest things, when they have, say, where you unsubscribe from their emails, for example, it'll have some really silly sentence to saying, "Are you sure you really want to stop receiving these stupid emails from us?" They really just go all in, and it encompasses their brand, it encompasses the product that they're actually trying to sell. Like they're just basically taking the piss out of themselves, but I find it really connects with the audience, and it just makes people buy stuff. I think it was a couple of years ago they actually ran a campaign for Black Friday or something like that, where it was like the product they sold was nothing, and it was like they said, hey, here, like, buy this nothing for $30, and people bought it. They made something like that crazy amount of money in a short period of time, just people basically giving them money, and that was it. Like, and they got away with it. And so I think that's a remarkable achievement for a brand to hit that level of success, where they've created trust within their audience. They are very obvious in the way that they talk. They're not trying to be anyone else but themselves. I think that's really interesting.
And I think that's a really beautiful way of expressing it, is they're not trying to be anyone else but themselves. And to do that, you have to really know who you are. And you have to have a very clear identity, which is part of the importance of doing this brand identity stuff. And for brands like Cards Against Humanity, or other brands who have a very distinctive tone of voice or identity, which is usually a bit more quirky or challenging or fun, they kind of do their own thing. Tone is so important for them, because if you've got Cards of Humanity, but then you get an email from them which is like, "Dear Greg, we are pleased to inform you that your Cards of Humanity board game has been packaged and is on its way to your residence. Kind regards, the Cards of Humanity team." Like, that would be the most weird, disconnected experience, because it's not at all aligned with the brand. And I compared the same thing to, like, as a friend, right? This is back to the point I made about consistency earlier. You start to expect your friends to act in particular ways and speak in certain ways and do certain things.
Yeah.
If your friend is like really inconsistent and is like showing up one day speaking like this and showing up another day talking like that, then you'd be like, what's going on with Greg? Like, is he
That's
okay?
True. You pick up on these things. Yeah.
You pick up on those things, and we're conditioned to notice this. And this is, how we actually form connections and relationships. And brands are basically just our attempt to create. Originally branding is like it's a symbol, right? It's a symbol of quality or ownership, but those symbols are designed to trigger emotions. Essentially, it's like you see, Greg Beazley branded on a cow. Like at first it's like, oh, that's Greg's cow, but then maybe after time it's like, Greg's cows are the best cows because he rears them well and they're best quality. So then that logo.
What a strange example.
Well, that's where branding starts,
Sure, yeah.
I told you, analogies, they're just on the fly. Too. These aren't planned. They're clearly not planned. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. But no, the point I'm making is that the symbol comes to represent meaning. And then it starts as a symbol, but then I think over time, this symbol has evolved into an identity. And then the brand cues like colors and all those sorts of things are like clothes. It's the appearance of someone. So we start expecting like they're going to dress in a particular way, they're going to speak in a particular way, and we can depend on them, we can count on them because we know what to expect, and they deliver on those expectations. And and tone of voice obviously is part of that.
Wow, that's super interesting. Like all of the stuff we've spoken about today, like I think that's going to be really helpful for a lot of people. Certainly, I've learned a lot about the concept of copywriting and the difference between messaging. Some of the tips you shared, actually, I had never thought of before. So I'm definitely going to be implementing them in my day-to-day work. But we've got to finish up here. But are there any sort of last words that you wanted to share with the audience, or any sort of other things you wanted to mention?
No, I think I've spoken enough. I don't have any other random analogies about Greg's cows to bring home. Make guys, just so you know, guys, Greg has the best cows. So if you need,
I have the best cows. Yeah,
go to Greg. If you want to hit me up or want to chat, you can find me on LinkedIn. It's Adrian J, the letter J Stewart, Stewart, or you can go to the TCM website, which is tcm.media.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you so much, Adrian. It's been a pleasure to chat and catch up with you. It was really cool to actually deep dive into this topic. I think I've never done this sort of thing before, but yeah, it was super interesting. So I really appreciate your time.
Anytime, Greg. More than happy to do it again. Enjoy your day at the beach.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks, man.
Okay, bye.
All right.